The scary month is once again among us. And that can only mean one thing. Crappy Halloween-themed media! Yay! Thomas has famously had its fair share of spooky, unsettling, and downright haunting episodes over the years. And today, we'll be looking through all of these spooky episodes and determining which of these is the spookiest, which of these episodes are truly horrifically horrifying, and which ones aren't. Let's find out! Or die trying! So we'll start with the originator of Thomas's spooks and surprises. Ghost Train, or Percy's ghostly trick if you live across the pond. And right away, we've got an episode that fully delivers on the frightening thrills. The episode centres around Percy telling a ghostly story, which Thomas being Thomas fobs off as dumb. The next night, Percy accidentally crashes into a line cart and conducts a plan to put Thomas in his place, which he does. A little too well. So let's talk about how this episode succeeds at all it's trying to do. First off is the obvious, and it's the legitimately scary atmosphere on full display. The pitch black, contrasty lighting, the abundance of fog, the eerie, haunting trees, and the beautifully unsettling music. Another aspect that delivers on the spooky thrills is the top-notch performance from both narrators. Both Ringo and George are brilliant as ever for the most part, but in terms of Percy's spooky voice, I think George outdid Ringo in all honesty. Overall, an amazing first spooky episode for the show. It feels less like a Thomas episode and more like a genuine horror movie. Now before we go over the next episode, I really need to bring up this DVD. The Best of Thomas from 2010, and how it had the balls to just give us back-to-back Ghost Train and Thomas, Percy and the Dragon. I just find it so crazy how that DVD had two great spooky episodes right next to each other. Anyways, Thomas, Percy and the Dragon. The main plot of the episode involves Percy getting stranded on a siding overnight, while Thomas has to deliver a Chinese dragon for a carnival the next day. During his night run, he unintentionally gives Percy the shock of his life. Yeah, there isn't too much to say about this episode's plot. This was one of the first stories written entirely by Britt and David, and it really shows. The writing and overall story are rather rough around the edges, and the moral is spoon-fed down the viewers' throats. Everyone likes to blame the mid-arse Series 6 for the obvious morals, but trust me, this problem got its start way before that. So it may seem like I'm tearing this episode a new arse, but honestly, it's kinda alright. And the main scare factor of this episode, that being Thomas spooking Percy, boy do they do it right. Overall, while not an entirely scary episode, by God it once again feels like a horror movie when it is scary. Haunted Henry, an episode from the series that dialed up the spookiness to 125, is one of the weaker spooky episodes from the series that dialed up the spookiness to 125. The episode revolves around Henry seeing unexplained closed-level crossing gates and danger signals, which Henry, of course, believes is paranormal activity, not helped by a mysterious figure in an abandoned station. Another night, Henry takes another train, and the trucks become frightened, they hit a landslip, and it turns out the ghost is old Bailey the Fogman, who wants the station to be reopened, and that's it. Overall, another rather simple story. However, the way in which the story plays out is the best part. It casts a sense of mystery that none of the others do with all the inexplicable warnings, and much like Ghost Train, the abundance of fog and dark lighting set the tone incredibly well. So while the episode's story is a bit janky, to say the least, the rest of the episode truly lives up to its haunting name.
Stupid bird.
Now, I'm pretty sure Stepney was the last character people expected to star in his own horror story. This episode follows Stepney, who, after a day's work at the quarry, is offered to pull a night train. When Stepney delivers said train, he loses his way home, gets diverted onto the wrong line, ends up at the bloody smelter's yard, and then before you have time to process the situation, along comes Ari and Bert to take him to the smelting shed, and then a fucking grabber prepares to pick Stepney up, despite him begging not to be scrapped, only to be saved in the nick of time by Fatty. Like, Here's an episode tackling attempted murder like it's nothing. The fact David and crew had the sheer audacity to throw this episode in and still have it greenlit and aired on television is nothing short of fantastic. This episode absolutely nails everything in terms of spookiness. The story is creepy and downright terrifying towards the end. The visuals and action are simply impeccable. I think we found the clear victor in terms of spooky episodes. Also, we need to talk about Ari and Bert in this episode. I'm just going to say it, they peaked at the beginning. I totally understand why everyone loves them in this episode, and why everyone is completely disappointed with their characters after Series 5. Thanks Series 6, love you. And now we come to the episode that cringy 15-year-old me turned into an abysmal, horribly written capsule playrail 15-minute Halloween special that totally isn't a rip-off of SIF's rewrite. But we're not talking about that smelly garbage today. We're talking about the official episode. So after Duncan gives Peter Sam an earful for an accident, Rusty tells the story of an engine who fell off that same bridge to his death, and now that engine's ghost haunts the bridge. Duncan dismisses the story as
nonsense.
Thank you. So the engine crews decide to trick Duncan into crossing the bridge at night and scaring him out of his wits. Now, it's pretty hard to find new things to say about this episode that haven't been said before, but I will say this is perhaps the most serious and mysterious episode we've covered so far. Not to mention how the music and overall tone really amplified the scare factor of the episode. Not really much else to say about this one, other than it's absolutely one of the greats. And right away we've got a not so hot episode. So Scaredy Engines is the very first explicitly Halloween centric episode. Cool, right? But why did it have to be this episode? So after hearing Edward tell a spooky story, Thomas, Duck and Percy sent to work at the smelter's yard. Thomas teases Percy about the sights and sounds while he's just whining about it. Then Duck orchestrates a plan to royally spook Thomas. He gets scared, Thomas and Percy apologise, blah blah blah. Right off the bat, this story feels like a much lesser version of Ghost Train. I know Percy doesn't scare Thomas or anything, but I think you can roughly catch my drift. And the spooky visuals, while cool, look rather flat. I'm not sure why, but I think it's down to the lack of excessive fog that almost every spooky episode prior had. But I will say, while this episode is severely lacking as a spooky episode, I do admire how it tackles the fear of isolation in the second half, with Thomas being on his own, and the quick shot changes every few seconds is rather nice. But overall, a rather weak episode. Oh boy, this one's gonna be a fiesta. Okay, so previously on the Aquabat Super Show, I went over my frustration with Donald and Douglas's utilisation in this episode, and how them being the ones to tease Percy was literally Bill and Ben's job, but it turns out that's the least of the episode's glaring issues. So this episode revolves around Percy helping Lower Tidmouth to win the Most Beautiful Station award, and having to pass by an old mine that sinks into the ground, which of course means it's spooky. Woo! The next night, Percy has to collect a train from the mine. Yippee, plot convenience to the rescue. And then gets scared by gnomes. I honest to God wish I was making this shit up, guys. This is fucking real and I can't stand it. At least they brought back the fog for the atmosphere, I guess. Yeah, I don't really know what else I'm supposed to say about Percy and the goddamn haunted mine. This is probably the worst one of the bunch. Can we go to the fun episode now? Oh, thank God, an actually good spooky episode. And our only spooky Jack episode of the lot. Scaredy Scaredy. Percy's scary tale is a myth. It does not exist. In this one, Kelly tells the tale of the one-eyed truck, which gives Max and Monty another chance to fuck about on site. Later that evening, they have to dump a load of building waste, only to see what they believe to be the one-eyed truck. They rush back in terror, only for the one-eyed truck to be revealed to be, yeah, of course, it's Thomas. The story is yet another one of the ghost train trope, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to get sick of it now. Other than that, it's a perfectly good scary episode. I especially admire the editing in this one, such as this fast pan and the sound effects throughout. And the digital effects which the crew were obsessed with around the time of this episode are actually put to great use in making the scene much scarier. In terms of narration, I think Angelus is the clear winner between him and Brandon, what with his frantic voice during the chase scene. But Brandon did a good job too. All in all, for the pack's only spooky episode, they hit a home run and more. Alright, now we're talking! In this episode, Thomas and Emily are tasked with working at the smelter's yard on Halloween. When they get to the smelters, they become creeped out by their surroundings. and Ari and Bert only seek to make things worse. Eventually, a tarpaulin lands on Emily, and while she believes she's been captured by a ghost, Thomas, Ari and Bert believe she is the ghost, and the chase begins. When they all get to Tidmouth Sheds, the truth of the matter is revealed, Ari and Bert are found out and punished, and Thomas and Emily aren't scared of the smells anymore. From that summary, the episode is almost like the writers looked at Scaredy Engines and said, hey, what if we tried making this episode not weak? Boom! A pretty solid story that doesn't feel half-baked at all. Let's go over the atmosphere of this episode. Just like Ghost Train, they pulled out all the stops in creating a legitimately scary atmosphere. What with the ominous piano music, the ghastly shrieking in the background, the haunting aesthetic of the smelters, and the panic narration from Angelus and Brandon. The chase scene I feel needs no elaboration, what with the intense music blasting away and, again, the brilliant performances from both English narrators. I honest to God think this is a strong contender for the close second best spooky episode behind Stepney Gets Lost. Just stellar all around. Flower power is funny. In this story, Thomas and Diesel have to collect flour and take it to the bakery, otherwise Fatty won't get his crumpets. Because if Emily's new route taught me anything, it's that Fatty needs crumpets in order to survive. Thomas becomes scared of the surroundings on the way to the mill, and Diesel torments him for it. Then Thomas decides to one-up Diesel by covering himself in flour and spooking him, which works a little too well. Now Thomas has to traverse the tyrannical terrain alone. While the plot is very much your hero versus bully story that's been milked to death, this episode is completely carried by its presentation. Since the lighting in this episode is much darker than it was in Halloween, the island feels much more ominous than last time now, and the sound effects and haunting, contrasty shadows enhance it greatly. Some great stuff, even if these buildings here kinda give me war flashbacks to Percy and the goddamn haunted mine. I guess this really is a great scary episode if it's reminding me of one of my worst fears. Also, we need to talk about how Fatty was originally going to have a devil outfit but was changed to a wizard outfit to avoid controversy, even though there's a child in a devil outfit in 2 spooky episodes before this, so why were they worried about being controversial? Overall, a pretty solid spooky episode, all things considered. And finally, we get to our only CGI spooky episode. And this spooky episode is Series 17's Murder on the Phantom Express. The plot of this one is, Percy becomes nervous of delivering the post to Ulstead Castle because of a story James told. Oh my god, not this trope again! Why can't we catch a break of this tired trope of character tells spooky story, other character gets scared, and then either character gets the scare of their life? Why can't they escape from this overused goddamn trope? Come up with a new trope for once. Or if you absolutely have to reuse an existing spooky story, do the ones that aren't redone to death. Otherwise, yeah, the spooky atmosphere is once again the highlight. And I suppose some of the scenes are rather ominous. But then again, there's no murder in this episode. Come on, you can't even give something that's right there in the title. Even some dumbed down kiddie murder would be so much better than nothing. But it isn't called Murder on the Phantom Express. It's just called The Phantom Express. Well, I'm afraid the joke's on you if you think I'm being serious. So from that, now it's time to answer the question of which Spooky Thomas episode is the spookiest. I had a tough time deciding. They all have their own pros and cons, with some having more cons than pros, but I've ultimately decided that the spookiest episode of the show is Stepney Gets Lost. Like, it's not even a contest. It has everything that makes a Spooky Thomas story a Spooky Thomas story, and it dials up the scare factor to 150. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is my look back on every Spooky Thomas episode. Which of these do you think is the spookiest episode? Be sure to let me know in the comments. Now remember, if you have any ideas for Tom Talks, let me know your big ideas in the comments and I'll keep them in mind for a future episode. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. If you'll be alive for the next one, that is.